Hello, Dr. Crossan. My name is Chris Pagala. The following presentation is for class PS625 and is titled Threats to America. 13 years after 9/11, terrorist threats continue to evolve rapidly, with an increasing number of groups around the world, including both Al-Qaeda affiliates and other terrorist organizations, posing a threat to the United States, our allies, and our interests. As a result of both ongoing worldwide efforts against the organization and senior leadership losses, Al-Qaeda's core leadership has been degraded, limiting its ability to conduct attacks and direct its followers. Subsequently, 2013 saw the rise of increasingly aggressive and autonomous Al-Qaeda affiliates and like-minded groups in the Middle East and Africa who took advantage of the weak governance and instability in the region to broaden and deepen their operations. The increase of terrorism that exists within the United States is causing many problems throughout society. Incidences of terrorism, specifically the September 11th attacks, are causing widespread panic. Americans no longer feel as safe and secure as they once did. Many people are constantly worried that other catastrophic attacks similar to September 11th will occur again soon. This increase of terrorism is partly due to Al-Qaeda's change or modifications since the September 11th terrorist attacks. Al-Qaeda was once an organization, but now it is a movement due to the fact that many terrorist networks or groups have been added and formed together based on common hatred for the United States or the American government in general. This new movement of terrorists includes terrorists from various different countries. Al-Qaeda and other Islamist extremist groups have long exploited Muslim-majority countries weakened or fragmented by conflict and neglected by the international community. They take advantage of these places to recruit, radicalize, and train the next generation of extremist foot soldiers. They use them to plot and plan attacks. That is why Al-Qaeda and its affiliates first went to Afghanistan in the 1990s. That is why they later returned to Yemen and Somalia in the 2000s. And it is why they are fighting to build sanctuaries in Syria, Libya, and Iraq today. Several factors make the prospect of Al-Qaeda sanctuaries in these three countries especially dangerous. The first is their respective locations. Syria and Iraq are in the heart of the Arab Middle East, bordering key American allies like Israel, Jordan, Turkey, and Saudi Arabia. Libya and Syria are Mediterranean states comparatively easy to reach from the west, in contrast to remote Afghanistan and Pakistan. And Libya is also adjacent to the vast Sahel, which is a weak and poorly governed state. Equally worrisome, there are all places where U.S. policymakers have signaled that involvement in the U.S. military is for all intents and purposes off the table, or at least severely constrained. This means that the United States is not able to combat the rise of Al-Qaeda in these countries effectively. Of the three countries, the situation in Syria is far the most alarming. The failure of U.S. policy by far the most profound, and its implications of our national security by far the most severe. According to one estimate, there are today more foreign fighters in Syria than in Iraq and Afghanistan combined over the past 10 years. Representative Adam Schiff agrees that low-level attacks are still very threatening, but that the United States is more effective than ever about keeping terrorism off its own soil. He says that the United States is undoubtedly safer from large-scale terrorist attacks, but smaller attacks by lone actors, such as in the case of the Boston Marathon bombing, continue to pose a threat to national security. Both Schiff and Representative McCall from Texas agree, however, that Syria remains a major problem and it has become a training ground for terrorists around the world, calling rebel forces more of a threat than anything. According to Dr. Jeff Raby, Australia's ambassador to China, the increased risk and prevalence of global terrorism looms as a major threat to regional development. Terrorist acts have already imposed significant increased costs on all economies. The immediate cost of terrorist acts, including loss of life, destruction of property, and depression of short-term economic activity, are compounded by the costs associated with the continuing threat of terrorism. Terrorism unchecked creates uncertainty, reduces confidence, and increases risk perceptions and risk premiums, leading to lower rates of investments and lower economic growth. Terrorist acts can severely disrupt international trade, and the continuing threat of terrorism imposes costs on international trade. Given their greater reliance on trade and capital inflows, developing economies may incur higher costs relative to the gross domestic product from unchecked terrorism. The cost of implementing counterterrorism measures should be viewed as an investment that, by reducing the threat to terrorism, will reduce risk premiums and the bias against longer-term productivity-raising activities that uncertainty and risk create. Due to regional and international economic linkages, terrorist events in one economy can impose significant costs on another regional economies. Economies which fail to combat terrorism and ensure the safety of trade and people movement could expect to incur significant costs in terms of lost investment and trade opportunities. The threat of terrorism also reduces trade flows. A shutdown of major ports or airports due to terrorist attacks could result in high costs, particularly for those economies more reliant on trade. It also increases insurance costs for cargoes and passengers. Research in New York has found that changes in the color-coded terror alert system are associated with increased signs of distress among a survey of nearly 2,000 people. When a color alert changed from yellow to orange, these people showed increased levels of depression, anxiety, phobic responses, and other signs of PTSD. When the alert levels dropped back again, the symptoms again spiked, indicating that public reminders of danger acted as a stressor regardless of the direction of the change. Reminders of the threat posed by terrorists also bolster society. Approval ratings for the president show a small rise every time the threat levels are changed, regardless of whether the level is increased or decreased. One explanation for this consequence is to return to mortality salience effect. When we are reminded of danger, we tend to show increased support to our own group and to leaders of that group. This naturally has led to accusations that announcements regarding terrorist threats since 9/11 included changes to the official threat levels, have occasionally been politically motivated. Terrorism can be dangerous, callous, and cruel, but in general the evidence is that society adapts. Even in every violent conflicts where terrorist attacks are happening, sometimes on almost hourly basis, society does not collapse under the psychological strain. Most people adapt and cope, displaying remarkable resilience. Indeed, the most psychological strain is often not seen when attacks are frequent and common, but rather when they are rare and unpredictable. In the latter circumstances, it is harder to develop a sense of control over the situation, and in the end, having a sense of control is important. Without it, we are much more susceptible to our fears. In some respects, the U.S. today faces the worst of both worlds. The welcome absence of any terrorist attacks in the homeland since 2001 at one level creates an impression of normality, yet this impression is constantly being jolted by the frequent warnings and public announcement of the continuing threat. It is an unhappy balancing act which shows no sign of ending soon. In addition to these external threats, the United States faces a serious threat from homegrown violent extremists inside its own borders. The disruptions over the past several years reveal that homegrown violent extremists come from a diverse set of backgrounds, ages, and life experiences. The HVEs support terrorism in a variety of ways, from traveling overseas to fight to plotting attacks inside the United States. In 2009, the homegrown violent extremists, or the HVEs, conducted their first successful attacks inside the United States. The most lethal occurred on November 5, 2009, when the Fort Hood military base was attacked by what appeared to be a lone gunman, killing 13 and wounding 43. The suspected shooter, Major Nidal Malik Hassan, is believed to have been acting alone and uses small arms to conduct his attacks. Factors that underscore the difficulty in intercepting the HVEs further complicate the HVE threat is their adept use of the internet, which serves as a facilitator for terrorist activity and a platform for radicalization. Previously, the internet was used primarily to spread propaganda. Today, it facilitates recruitment, training, and fundraising activities and allows HVEs to overcome their geographic isolation to connect with like-minded extremists. The disruption of at least 3 HVEs plotting homeland attacks during 2010 serves as a reminder that their threat shows no signs of stopping anytime soon.